All right, good evening, everyone. For those that haven't found a seat, we welcome you to do so now. We are going to get underway. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Brad Levine. I'm the Vice President of the Douglas Caldwell-Leighton Foundation for Social Democracy, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you all to the third annual Dave Barrett Lecture. It's such a thrill to see so many folks here at the Fairmont Empress Hotel in Victoria. We're on the traditional territories of Coast Salish, Songhees, and the Esquimalt First Nations. And for those who will be watching this online later, we have a great room full of supporters of the Foundation from throughout the South Island, leaders and activists from BC's trade union movement, current and former MLAs, current and former cabinet ministers, including former premiers. A little bit later, Premier David Eby will be joining us, and special guests. And this is very exciting for me because in the past, schedules haven't been allowing for the Barrett family to join us, but tonight it is my pleasure to welcome Dave Barrett's wife, Shirley Barrett, is here, and Dave Barrett's son, Joe Barrett, is here, right here in the front row. Welcome to the Barrett family. So great that you folks could be here tonight. I'm so thrilled. Now, my friends, in 1971, this is not going to take that long, trust me, but we'll skip through history quickly. In 1971, after stepping down as the first leader of the New Democratic Party of Canada, Tommy Douglas launched this foundation along with his friend and longtime collaborator, MJ Caldwell, who worked side by side with Tommy at the provincial and federal levels. Most notably, MJ served as the last leader of the CCF, the precursor to the NDP. And in 2022, we added Jack Layton's legacy to the Foundation's name. Yes, give it up for the Layton legacy. And for those younger folks, there's so many young people here, it's wonderful when you see so many great old friends, and then you see so many unfamiliar faces of young people who are here. It's so wonderful to see. And for those who are new to social democracy here with us tonight, please know that while Tommy Douglas, the father of Medicare, as the Premier was mentioning earlier today, which he built over 17 years as Premier of the province of Saskatchewan, the people of British Columbia also have just as long of a tenure in his legacy as the people of Saskatchewan. Because Tommy Douglas, of course, and we don't forget our history, and I know the history group of the NDP are here with us tonight, Tommy Douglas served British Columbians in the House of Commons for 17 years between 1962 and 1979 in ridings in Coquitlam, Burnaby, and of course Nanaimo and the islands. So we have as much in British Columbia to be proud of Tommy Douglas's service as the people of Saskatchewan. Now, the mandate that Tommy set out for the Foundation was straightforward: to educate Canadians from all walks of life about the importance of social democracy, and today this is done through the publication of research, books, and lectures and scholarships in the pursuit of generating ideas to contemporary challenges for social democratic legislatures at all levels of government. And the Foundation also ensures that Canadians learn more about the pioneers of our movement and celebrate their contributions for the betterment of a fairer, just, and democratic Canada. And on behalf of the Foundation's board, I'm pleased to report that after 54 years since launch, the Foundation has never been stronger or more active right across Canada than it is today. And we have our supporters and sponsors, many of whom are right here in this room, to thank. And so on behalf of the board, I want to thank all of our sponsors, and we'll do so again at the end of our evening's agenda. Thank all of the folks that make the Foundation's work, and especially tonight, such a reality. One of the hallmark activities of the Foundation is the lecture series, which we launched in 2022. We have the Alexa McDonough Lecture Series in Halifax. We have the Jack Layton Lecture at McGill University in Montreal. We have the David Lewis Lecture at the University of Toronto. We have the Blakey Woodsworth Knowles Lecture at the University of Winnipeg. Next year, we launch the Tommy Douglas Lecture Series at the University of Regina and the Notley Family Lecture at the University of Alberta in Edmonton. Not bad. We're getting there. Now, in November of 2022, former Premier John Horgan, at our 50th anniversary celebration in Ottawa, announced the creation of the Dave Barrett Lecture and Scholarship at the University of Victoria. And tonight is the third event in this series. At the inaugural event in October 2023, we had a panel, Premier John Horgan, Carol James, who we celebrated earlier today with a lifetime membership. We had former Cabinet Minister Andrew Petter, and of course Jeff Meggs, who's with us tonight, one of the authors of the book on Dave Barrett. And they explored the Barrett legacy when it comes to innovation of government. In May of 2024, the second installment in our series, the Barrett Lecture welcomed Joy MacPhail, former Cabinet Minister and MLA, in conversation with the president of our sister organization, the Friedrich Ebert Foundation from Germany, to talk about the state of social democratic parties and governments in Europe in the face of the rise of the far right and authoritarianism. And tonight, the third installment, speaking on the topic of the day, we have an outstanding panel who will discuss the economic solutions for British Columbia in light of the challenges imposed on this economy by the U.S. White House. And here to introduce the panel and set the stage for what I have no doubt will be an outstanding discussion, two-time elected city councillor in the City of Victoria, five-time elected MLA for Victoria Swan Lake, former Minister of Education, and the former Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure, a great friend of the Foundation. Please welcome Rob Fleming.
Well, thank you for that great introduction, Brad, and good evening, everyone. I am very pleased to be able to introduce tonight's panel theme, as well as our panelists, and I will be very brief because I'm reminded of the quote by Oscar Wilde that the trouble with socialism is it requires too many evenings. But tonight I expect we'll have a very wide-ranging discussion on some of the issues confronting Canadians, perhaps touching on what a progressive response looks like to the trade tensions being ratcheted up by the United States, perhaps touching on what a Made in BC response as part of a broader Team Canada needs to focus on, things like expanding good middle-class skilled jobs, creating durable partnerships between industry, First Nations, and trade unions to deliver on economic growth and prosperity, and ensuring that the benefits are fairly and broadly shared across British Columbia. As we heard Premier Eby this afternoon say in his remarks to our convention, British Columbia, in fact, has a lot of assets at its disposal. We have a world-class supply of critical minerals that the world both wants and needs. We have a skilled workforce that is globally ranked for building infrastructure. And we've embarked on a pathway for collaboration and partnership with First Nations that sends a positive signal to investors who want to build and create wealth and ensure that it's done sustainably here in British Columbia. Now, Brad has done a great job explaining what the Douglas Caldwell Layton Foundation is for those who are uninitiated. It does sort of sound like a Mount Rushmore of past progressive leaders in Canada. But through these debates and discussions that we're holding in countries across Canada, we're hoping to find a way to move Canadian social democracy forward, less focused on our past and more focused on what it means to build a bright future to some of the challenging public policy issues that confront us. So without any further ado, let's get started, and I will introduce our moderator and panel, and then they will come up on stage. Moderating our panel this evening is my very good friend, all of our very good friend, BC's former Minister of Finance, Minister of Children and Family Development, Katrina Conroy. Katrina served her constituents in Kootenay West in the legislature from 2005 to 2024. Prior to politics, she was a power engineer at Celgar Pulp Mill, and then she built a career in early childhood education. And in life since politics, Katrina is literally back at the ranch in the ranching industry, and a grandparent to 9 grandkids, and I'm told 2 are on the way. So probably more soon. Let's introduce our guests, because our distinguished panel includes, firstly, Glen Clark, former leader of the BC NDP, the 31st Premier. Since being the 31st Premier of British Columbia, Glen has had a 20-year career with the Jim Pattison Group as both President and Chief Operating Officer, and that is BC's largest private sector company and employer. Mr. Clark now serves, thankfully, as the chair of BC Hydro, where he is overseeing one of the largest ever expansions of our province generation and transmission of renewable electricity. We also have someone near and dear to us, Bryn Bork, the Executive Director of the BC Building Trades, which is an association Bryn represents an association with 25 unions, over 45,000 members. That's probably higher now. She's been a council member since 2012. She's led the organization since 2021. She is indeed the first woman leader of the BC Building Trades in its 50-year history. And she is a prominent voice for investing in the expansion of skills, training, and apprenticeship opportunities for young people. She's helped secure project labor agreements on both public and private sector infrastructure projects worth tens of billions of dollars that keep good paychecks right here in British Columbia. And she's also the Vice President of the BC New Democratic Party. Bryn, welcome. And finally, we are thrilled to have with us a panelist to round out this great group, Karen Ogan, who is the CEO of the First Nations Natural Gas Alliance. Please welcome Karen. The First Nations Natural Gas Alliance is a consortium in support of responsible LNG development in Canada. She has over a dozen years of elected leadership experience in the Indigenous community. She was elected as chief of the Wet'suwet'en Nation from 2010 to 2016. Karen has extensive experience securing First Nations environmental and resource partnership ventures with both the public and private sectors in territories across British Columbia. She also has a background in social work and a lot of degrees, both a Master's of Social Work and a Master's of Business Administration. Karen, thank you for being here. And with that, we'll begin our evening, and we'll get rid of this podium, and we'll start. Thank you very much, each and every one of you, for taking valuable time and being here tonight. Thank you.
He says, get going. Okay, get on with it, Kat. And before we start, there's more seats over here. Like if you're standing in the back, like this is going to be an hour. So no, it's going to be 40 minutes. You might not want to stand the whole time. We'll try to make it really exciting. So, but it's really great to be here as your moderator. Rob neglected, I think he asked me because I'm a resource person from rural BC, and I was forest minister too. That was kind of important for the resource industry, Rob. But anyway. And I was what? And I take his calls. Yeah, that was dumb. Okay, no, I'm really looking forward to this. And the biggest job tonight is going to be able to keep the panelists moving along and keep their answers succinct, Glen. But we want to make sure that we have some really great questions to ask the panelists. That we've got an amazing people here that we want to hear what they have to say, and so we got to keep this moving along. So, and don't forget that we're going to finish a little bit before. We have to be finished by 7, but we're going to finish this part before, so that you will have time to come up and talk to any one of these amazing people if you had a question that didn't get answered. Okay. So without further ado, we're going to jump into this, and we're starting a question that is going to Glen. So we're going to take turns asking people, and if the panelists want to chime in after, they can add if they totally disagree with each other, but well, hopefully not. We'll see. Okay, economic uncertainty brought about by global events and pressures are not new to BC. We had the OPEC crisis in the early 70s when Dave Barrett was premier. We had the economic recessionary periods in the US and Asia throughout the 90s under both Premiers Harcourt and Clark. COVID under Premier Horgan. Tell us how this round of economic uncertainty is different from those we faced in the past. What are the challenges and opportunities you see from each of your perspective? And let's start with you, Glenn.
Sure, thanks. And thanks for inviting me, and thanks. Nice to see Shirley here and Joe. Dave Barrett saved my butt so many times, I can't tell you. I think this recession, this challenge, is far worse than the previous ones. Those ones were cyclical economic issues. This is a fundamental existential question about the future of the country. And I don't think Canadians quite understand how serious the threat is from the United States. And I'll just give you a couple of examples. We're sitting here, and these lights are on because of BC Hydro. The power line that comes from the mainland across here goes through the San Juan Islands. It goes through the United States. And it goes through the United States with a presidential permit. And because historically we've had obviously terrific relations with our neighbors next door. In PowerX, which is a subsidiary of BC Hydro, we earn for the people of British Columbia somewhere between $500 and $600 million by buying cheap power and selling it to them when they need it at a higher price. So we have a trading relationship with the United States. The energy certificates that allow us to buy power and bring it back to Canada and sell power in the United States are presidential permits that can be turned off at any time. So that's just BC Hydro. But our whole economy is geared towards trading with the United States for a number of reasons, some of which are free trade related and all the changes that integrated the North American economy with the United States, but some of which are just historical because it's very close to us and very easy for us to export into the United States. That is being threatened by, I don't think by one person, but by a political system in the United States. And I could talk at length, but I'll just say one anecdote. So when I was premier, we actually reduced stumpage on the forest industry. We had in those days we had a quota system, so there was some argument that it didn't affect our relations with the United States. I went to the United States. I met with a guy named he used to call Mad Max Baucus. Max Baucus was a senator from Montana. And I went to meet him, and he kicked out all the advisors from the room. It was just him and I. I was the premier. He was a senior senator. And he said, look, you Canadians talk about free trade. He said, I don't give a shit about free trade. This quote, he said, I care about jobs in Montana, and I assume you only care about jobs in British Columbia, to which I said, of course, that's correct. So let's actually try to cut a deal, which we did, and it was successful, and we were successful moving forward. But American protectionism's always been there, and it's latent, and it's tough. And people thought the free trade agreement, a legal structure, would insulate us from American protectionism, and it has not, and anybody in the forest industry can tell you that. And so what's happened now is we have a president, of course, who wants to exploit that competitive advantage the United States have. And we are ill-equipped to deal with that. And that requires dramatic and significant government action to try to reshape our economy so we're less dependent on the United States. And I would say this is a positive thing. I believe strongly that it's a great time to be in government because for the first time in many, many years, Canadians expect governments to take a leadership role in dealing with this question. And fortunately, in British Columbia, we have a government that is prepared to do that.
Thanks, Glenn. Do you want to add?
Well, I think Glenn really touched on, this, the seriousness of the moment that we have, our largest trading partner, our neighbor, for a long time, our closest friend, doing everything that they possibly can to diminish us in every way for their own gain. And I think it is a whole new reality, but one that I can also see that our leaders in our province are taking seriously. And there is a real opportunity to lean into this moment to do big things again. In the building trades, we represent 45,000 unionized construction workers, and we build the major infrastructure around the province, the hydroelectric dams, the bridges, the highways. We also are integrated in the forest industry and do a lot of the shutdown turnarounds, and have watched our family members in, you know, the steel workers watch this, the 20 years of deindustrialization and how devastating that has been for rural communities. And we have a moment, you know, we're in a moment where instead of being passive in this process, we're actually thinking about how do we build again? How do we bring, you know, jobs back to these communities? And government is getting in the driver's seat and driving that agenda. So I think there is a lot of opportunity for communities and workers.
Okay, thanks, Bryn. Did you want to add to that? Karen?
Sure. From an Indigenous perspective, I think that when we talk about economic uncertainty, well, we call it what it is, poverty. Indigenous people have known poverty for I don't know how many years since we've been colonized. So I think that now, after 600 court cases later, we have a seat at the table. So when we talk about major projects, Indigenous people will be at the forefront of these major projects. And some of the challenges and opportunities that I see are, the challenges are maybe the opposition and the resistance to these major projects. But I think that that whole notion of education and awareness on all of the pros and cons to the environmental issues and risks, as long as they're being communicated out to our people, I think that we're going to have a win-win across the board. And I just really hope to see those opportunities for Indigenous people across the value chain.
Great, thank you to everyone. Okay, our second question. Both Ottawa and BC are doubling down on big infrastructure projects to stimulate job growth and long-term resiliency. These measures are consistent with social democratic economic solutions to spur private sector investment. What are some of the projects that you see as being critical to BC's growth in the next few years? And start with you, Karen.
Well, I had to do my homework and check the projects that Carney had mentioned a few days ago. And surprisingly, 2 are in BC. The rest are across Canada. So I think we have an opportunity, especially because I'm from the north, I advocate for the north, and those 2 projects are up in the north. So the Salisum's LNG project with the Niska is one of them, and the North Coast Transmission Line, which 2 are dear to my heart because they're up in the north. And I really want to emphasize how that's going to bring a lot of opportunity for our people in the employment, trades, and training for our people. So that's a big plus, especially for Indigenous people, for British Columbians, and for the rest of Canada.
Okay, thanks, Karen. Bryn, do you want?
Yeah, and I think I'll leave the North Coast Transmission Line for Glenn as our resident BC Hydro expert. And I sort of see two big projects. The first one I wanted to talk about was LNG Canada, Phase 2, and to say that on LNG Canada Phase 1, that was the largest industrial project in Canadian history, and over 10,000 building trades members went and worked on that project, and hundreds and hundreds of apprentices earned their red seal on that project. People were able to get mortgages and earn down payments on their first home. I mean, it truly was life-changing for the local community and also workers right across British Columbia and across Canada. And so wanted to flag the size and scale of that as a really big thing that we did in British Columbia. And also to say that other projects like hospitals are really, really significant. And I don't know if folks realize how many hospitals we're building right now, all at once. It is absolutely historic. And so for our members, who are working on the Cowichan District Hospital, but also Nanaimo, on the Surrey Cloverdale Hospital project, I mean, there are, 300 plus electricians on the Surrey Cloverdale Hospital project right now. And there's another example where we have folks who will walk onto a construction site for the first time on one of those projects, and they'll earn their entire red seal. on that project. And it really is an opportunity for us to look at how we leverage these investments for more than just the buildings that we're building, necessary as they are, but get the most for communities and workers. So those would be the high, the super huge projects, and the smaller ones that I think are just as important.
And just to point out, it benefits the entire province. The number of people from the Lower Mainland. I mean, my son-in-law lives in Castlegar, and he worked up in Kitimat. And I mean, it's huge across the entire province. So it generates economic value for everybody. It's great. Yeah, Glenn, you can add.
Sure. What are the 3 jurisdictions in North America that have the cheapest electricity rates? Does anybody know? There are 3 jurisdictions that are lower, dramatically lower than anywhere in really the world outside of Saudi Arabia, and they're basically Quebec, Manitoba, and British Columbia. Now, why is that? All 3 are crown corporations. All 3 are crown corporations that have driven the price of power, renewable power in every case, by the way, the lowest in the world. So we have this huge competitive advantage in British Columbia that our neighbors, for example, in Alberta don't have. They have other advantages, but for British Columbia, we benefit by having a low-cost base of power. The North Coast Transmission Line, which the first 2 phases of which are $6 billion, just to put it in context, these are high-voltage lines, so those towers, think of a big, giant, high-voltage tower, power line, 3,000 of them between Prince George and Terrace, starting construction this summer, all with building trades members or 258, BC Hydro unionized employees. This is a giant project that we're doing, hopefully, in partnership with First Nations. And we've been working very hard on this. The next phase, the 3rd phase, goes, of course, from Terrace north to what they call Bob Quinn, which is farther north, where there's tremendous critical mineral opportunities up there, especially when you get up into the Tahltan territory. And of course, there's the possibility of going all the way to the Yukon. If you want a nation-building project of public power, generating this massive transmission line that's opening up opportunities for mining and critical industries and wealth and opportunities for First Nation partnership, and then all the way up the line. And to power the line, we're doing a minimum of 10 wind projects in partnership with First Nations. So we have this tremendous leverage opportunity using the public sector, using the state to drive our competitive advantage that's because of the legacy left behind by previous governments in British Columbia. So we're in a terrific spot to take advantage of that.
Great. Okay. Thank you all. Okay. This one's kind of catered to you, Bryn, but as head of BC Building Trades, what does our government, the EB government, need to do to ensure that we have the labor force for BC to succeed over the next 5 to 10 years? This might have been drafted up just before yesterday's big announcement, but I think you should talk about that.
We need to train. Well, and Katrine referenced truly a transformational announcement that the government made yesterday, where it announced that it was doubling apprenticeship funding from $107 million to $214 million. And I want to give you some context for this. So, we had an incredibly robust trades training system under ITAC, and when the BC Liberals were running originally in 2001, they campaigned on a massive tax cut, and they actually had no plan for how they were going to fund this tax cut. And when they were elected, they told all of their ministers, you need to cut 20% out of your budget. And then they said, but we can't cut certain things from health or education, so other ministries will have to cut 30, 40, 50%. So the Industry Training Apprenticeship Commission took a massive cut. They had 16 regional offices across the country and over 120 staff. They closed every single regional office. They laid off almost their entire staff and became basically a call center in Richmond. And that was the state of trades training by 2003. And we have not increased core funding to apprenticeship ever since. And so what we've seen is a completely, you know, a trade training system that is atrophied and is desperate for investment. And now, this investment that's being made in our apprenticeship system, it will completely transform what we can do. It's going to open so many doors for people to enter, you know, skilled training all across the province, right? And give our trainers the resources they need. I think in addition to trades training and funding the system appropriately, I also want to say that I think it's really important that we build a culture of apprenticeship. And we can do that as a province by requiring apprenticeship ratios on public projects. And we can do it in the private sector by rewarding private proponents for having apprenticeships. But that we really need to, you know, give the opportunity. It's one thing to have a seat and have someone go in and do their first level of technical training in an institution. 80% of their learning is on the job, and they need a sponsor to do that. And we've got to find those sponsors and build back that culture again.
Karen, do you want to?
The only thing that I would add to that, because being the former chief of my nation, I'd get a lot of feedback in terms of employment and training and trades for our people. And one of the things that I recognized being a part of the Coastal GasLink pipeline, like I like to look at things as lessons learned. How could we do things better? There's always room for improvement. So what I would like to see is, you know, our Indigenous people, you know, we're less than, what, 4% of the population here, but we still need to continue to put education and training and trades in the forefront, the funding to do that. So it's very promising. I'm hoping that some of that money will trickle to the First Nations communities so that we can increase the trades. Because what I found on these major projects was that we were given jobs like house cleaning, security, cooks. We want more. We want more for our people. So I'm hoping that we're going to be a part of that.
I couldn't agree more with Karen. You're totally right. I just want to elaborate a little bit on BC Hydro, just because I think the minister's here, and he's my boss now. So
role reversal.
That's right.
Big role reversal.
So if you think about what are you laughing at? It is. If you think about BC Hydro. If you think about this system I just talked about, which is the lowest cost, amongst the lowest cost in the world, it was built in the 60s and 70s. So it is basically 60 years old, the basic system. Well-maintained, excellent employees, all high, really, really diligent, well-maintained system. But a lot of the system is coming to the end of life. So we need to reinvest. So 60% of our capital plan, which will be, I'm careful what I say here, but say it's 40 billion, roughly. 60% of that is going to be reinvested in our existing system. We have power lines that are 100 years old. We have dams that are 100 years old. The structure of the dams are fine, but the generating, the facilities. So the nice thing about BC Hydro is it is all across the province. So that what we need to do is take advantage of that. This is the key social democratic difference, I think, is when the public sector is spending public money on crown corporations, we need to maximize the benefit for the people of British Columbia. That means we want trades training associated with every single major project that we do in British Columbia to leverage the money. We're doing the next Revelstoke 6, which is a $1 billion project to complete the Revelstoke Dam, if you will. There's one sort of tube, if you've ever been up there, you'll see, and a generating station, $1 billion. That is going to be done in Revelstoke. So what can we do in Revelstoke to make sure young people in Revelstoke have access to that opportunity for training, for people like your family who can stay in their communities and learn a trade and get hours towards their Red Seal in their communities. And I think we have a great opportunity in the British Columbia simply because we have a big, big capital plan which makes a lot of sense for British Columbia. Long term, it's economic, and it creates a lot of jobs in British Columbia, and good, high-skilled paying jobs.
Great, thank you. So, Karen, I'm just going to go back to you because you made some comments. This question is perfect for some of the comments you made. Reconciliation and ensuring Indigenous communities participate in economic growth is vital to our success, all of our success here in this province. And without solid First Nations partnership, the mining of critical minerals in the Golden Triangle would not be so far advanced. What are some of the other big opportunities you see across the BC economic growth that involves First Nations community leadership?
Well, I think because I represent LNG, I think that's first and foremost. I think that we've come to a place where, in my mind, it seemed like Canada and BC were kind of going down that whole emissions cap path where both oil and gas were going to be ousted out the back door. That's what it seemed like. But it's like miraculously Trump woke us up. So now all of a sudden it's back on the value chain. So I think that was the first major project that went through our territories that we had a seat at the table with. So that's the only thing that we have to compare with right now. But we will be having the transmission line going through. There's other pipelines going through up in the north, which I think is a good start. And I think that as long as there's inclusion, partnerships, true, meaningful partnerships with First Nations, I think that there'll be a path forward for all of the major projects to go through.
Thanks, Karen. Do you want to add to that, Glenn?
No, I mean, Karen's correct, of course. There's opportunity in the north that both mining, obviously wind power and a bunch of other projects that we have, hydropower. There's a lot of pent-up opportunities in the north. And I do think that governments, I think actually this is the people of Canada, the sense of urgency I've never seen I don't think in my lifetime. Like people are seriously want to see action. They want to see governments take the lead and drive these kind of projects. And I think they're really important. I think that if you believe, as I do, and I don't think all Canadians do, but I believe we have an existential threat south of the border that is very, very serious. And we have to take it very seriously. We have to take this opportunity to diversify away from the United States. And the easiest... and in British Columbia, the easiest place to do that is through mining and exports to Asia. And that is an opportunity that we have always had, and we have done some good projects there, but this time it's different. We really need to lessen our reliance. And I think so that's where the momentum comes. And First Nations, and this is, I think, also a change from when I was in government last time, the First Nations are keen to be partners in that development. They want to make sure that they're built environmentally sound, that we respect sacred territories, that we're conscious of it, but they want to be part of the solution and part of the project. And I think it's a very exciting time for that.
Ben?
Well, and I wanted to pick up on the comment you made, Karen, which which is very fair. That in sort of historically with major project delivery, we really have not maximized the opportunities for Indigenous people, and it is such a missed opportunity because Indigenous people have a long and proud history in construction, and many of our unions, for example, our ironworkers union, 19% of all apprentices are Indigenous. So they have always had a significant role in building our province. And I think that a key to unlocking this is to involve First Nations communities and leadership in workforce development planning well before we break ground on a project. And to give you an example, right, I'm going to come back to Cloverdale Hospital. So Cloverdale Hospital was announced, and Houle Electric, which is an electrical company, knew that it was going to bid on the hospital. It called the IBEW and said, we're going to bid on this project. It's going to require 350 electricians 3 years from now if we win the bid. Get ready. And so it went, right? The Electrical Joint Training Committee started to pull new people in, started to do the recruitment to scale up, right? And it's that kind of planning that if we can look at projects and look at by trade, how are they going to enter the site? How many are needed? What is the schedule? We can maximize that, training deliveries and get ahead of this so that we're really being, creating those opportunities for local people. So I think we've got some good conversations to have in the future.
I just have to add to that. I think one of the things, and I see this as a lessons learned, and I don't know all the details about it, but I know that in Cowichan there was a construction project happening, and the First Nations had to sit on the sidelines and watch. They couldn't bid on it, they couldn't work on it, so I'd like to see partnerships with First Nations of that land be part of the project with building and across the value chain. That's important.
So, I mean, you've all touched on this a bit, but I'm just going to give it to you so that you can drill down a bit more. But I'm going to start with you, Glenn. Like, what are some of the advantages we have here? And of course, you're going to say BC Hydro, but that's a perfect example. But what BC should be learning and leaning into during this era of economic uncertainty?
Well, I do think natural resources are a key. I mean, remember, I think a lot of people forget the people of British Columbia own the natural resources, not private companies. This actually, I think sometimes people forget, in Canada, when I talk to around the world, you say to people, no, those trees are not owned by the company. They're owned by the people of British Columbia. And the same with our resources. So we have not privatized that, historically never done that in many parts of Canada, certainly in British Columbia. So we have all of this Crown land and Crown assets and Crown opportunities. We have a Crown asset in BC Hydro that can help open up those opportunities. So those are the obvious areas to start. The training piece, which is a terrific announcement, by the way. I don't know how many people are tuned into it, but this announcement yesterday, was it yesterday? Or 2 days ago by the Premier, is exactly the kind of strategy you want to do if you want to build it. In a time of fiscal challenges, where the government clearly has real fiscal challenges, to take that money, that scarce resource, and deploy it here is the right strategy, because we have to grow our way out of this. We're not going to cut healthcare and education and all the social programs. Let other governments do that. We need to protect those assets, which are part of our competitive advantage, and then we need to grow the economy. And the way to grow the economy, the best way, is with this natural opportunity that we have in the Northwest in partnership with First Nations. And I think we're on our way there. The training was, I think, to be fair to critical of the government, was a missing piece, I think. And they've solved that problem now. Now deploying it, we got to make sure they deploy it correctly. But, making sure that it gets to the right people and we really make the investment necessary. Because what happens when you train these people is, of course, if you're a trained plumber, trained electrician, on a big mega project, and you have a 4 or 5 year run there, after that, you're a trained electrician. There's all kinds of opportunities that opens up if you have skilled workforce. And we have underinvested in skills training in British Columbia for too long. And we're finally making that difference. And when you partner with these big projects, and you force the companies, and you force the crowns, and you force government to make sure that there's apprenticeship quotas and ratios and training, and the funding is there to do that, boy, I think we've got a terrific future here in BC.
Well, I think you're talking about what are the advantages we have in British Columbia, and absolutely, I mean, as Glenn touched on, publicly owned power. And I am just completing my first year on the board of BC Hydro, and what an incredible gem. And I won't sort of rehash what Glenn has said, but you look anywhere else and look at what people are paying for power, look at the scarcity and fear about energy security. It is truly the crown jewel of our province. But the thing I wanted to touch on was the fact that British Columbia is a coastal province, and that opens up so much opportunity. I mean, opportunity to export to other markets, opportunities to expand our ports. and also opportunities for LNG and opportunities for shipbuilding. And I think that one of the things I am most heartened by is having this moment reveal to us what do we want for our future with shipbuilding, and how do we want to take this industry that truly for 100 years British Columbians built all of the vessels in BC and all of the ferries, but also a lot of the commercial vessels, we're incredibly skilled, incredibly talented. We actually just this last December, 11 months ago, launched the HMS Protector, which is the longest vessel in Canadian history. We did that here in British Columbia. And so we have an opportunity to really lean into this moment and say, we can do big things on the shipbuilding side as well. And I think Seaspan is fantastic, and they're a very mature, substantial shipyard. It's Seaspan, it's Davie, it's Irving, but it's also all the other yards that have been neglected for far too long, and the opportunities that shipbreaking can bring to communities like Port Alberni. So I think there's a lot of exciting things that we can do if we really seize this moment.
Karen? Yeah.
One thing that I will add is the equity ownership piece. I think that's on the table with all of these major projects. And one thing that I'd like to point out is Enbridge is setting the stage and setting precedents where they have 38 out of 46 First Nations having an equity ownership on an existing pipeline. And I think that opens the door for other infrastructure here in BC to do the same, because I think that will build trust, that will build in the respect for First Nations to start to be at the table on equity ownership across the board.
Thank you. Glenn, you wanted to add?
This is unusual for me to say this, but I do also want to quickly say that we've talked a lot about the natural resources, the opportunities, but I think we'd be remiss on the economic strengths of British Columbia not to talk about things like childcare, like things like our education system, like our healthcare system. We have competitive advantages in British Columbia about quality of life, about tourism opportunities, ecotourism opportunities. We shouldn't ignore. We're talking today a lot about these big projects, and it's absolutely correct, and I'm totally excited by it. But I think we should not underestimate that there's terrific opportunities in British Columbia to develop all kinds of technology industries and others because of our quality of life, because we've protected so much of our environment, because we have a government that cares about other than just big projects. And so I think it's important to just not acknowledge it.
I've been going to conventions for a long time, and every convention there was a resolution on childcare. Everyone. And to talk to people now that have been benefited by the childcare, that when we brought it in, I'm an early childhood educator. I sat in the house and cried when Carol announced that we were all so excited about it that we were going to do this. It's a 10-year project. Yeah. But when you talk to, primarily is women, who have benefited by it, and the young woman today, she's not saving $900 a month, she's saving $2,500 a month. And that is life-changing. People are, and they can go back to work, and they're adding to the economy. It's making Brenda's numbers better, right, Brenda? Yay. No, so it's significant. But the other thing, I'm going to blow your own horn a little bit, Glenn. The government in the 90s had the foresight to create the Columbia Basin Trust and the Columbia Power Corporation. And what they did is they planned out the generation, like the 4 assets in the Columbia Basin to add power generation to them. But they didn't do it all at once. They did it one after the other. They brought in the Allied Hydro Agreement based on the agreement done in the 90s, so that people could work on each project. They could be at home. They could be living with their families, not away because people that worked on dams, any of you have worked on dams over the years, everybody had to leave their home, leave their families to go work, but they worked in their community and it was spaced out over 12 years, and every one of those projects came in time, on budget. They had more apprenticeships than they had ever thought they'd had. They had Indigenous people from the region that were hired to work, and it was just, it's an obvious example of how great that works when you take local people, you train them. I'm still talking to young people, young woman who came up, she says, when's the next dam project coming? Because she didn't mean dam project, she meant dam, with generators and stuff. Because she said, I got my apprenticeship now and I'm a full red seal and I want to work some more. So I'm going to phone her and say, you're going up to BC Hydro, sister. So up to Revelstoke, which is really close to home. So no, it's that foresight in the 90s benefited people for the next 12 years. So not that the government of the day gave anybody credit for it but themselves, but we won't go there. Anyway, this is a bit of a political question. You've all mentioned the U.S., but I want to reiterate that, the U.S. is turning its back on Canada as a reliable, dependable trading partner, and while we are less dependent on trade with the U.S. than Alberta, for instance, Ontario, Quebec, the U.S. still accounts for 54% of all of our exports here in BC. And key among them is the wood, pulp and paper, the minerals. And historically, BC has developed deepest of Canada's trade ties with Asia. And is there any more trade diversification with countries like Japan, South Korea, Malaysia, and the Philippines? Do you think any of that is something that we should be looking at, and that it's because Trump is going to be there for another 3 years. Shit, Jesus. Anyway, sorry to bring the crowd down, but my God, that's reality.
I think there's big opportunities. I mean, Ravi Parmar was just in Japan, and we do good business in Japan and South Korea, and there's real opportunities. Actually, Mike Harcourt created the BC, what was it called? BC International Trade, what was it called? We had an international trade organization. It was a Crown Corporation, and it did a lot of kind of what you call missionary work almost about promoting British Columbia in all kinds of different parts of the world. Of course, the Campbell government got rid of all that stuff, and this government is sort of slowly kind of getting back into it. There is real opportunities for us, especially now. If you think about this, everywhere I go, even on a holiday, if you go around, if you meet an American, the first thing they say is they didn't vote for Trump. They want to talk to you about it. And the reason I say that is that it's not just Canada that they've turned their back on. The Americans are fighting with everybody, and they're looking for allies. And Canada is a fantastic spot to cut deals with people who have like-minded. Like it's like the UK or Australia, or from British Columbia's point of view, the East, where we're closer. We're a full day sailing closer, of course, to Japan out of Prince Rupert than we are anywhere else on the coast of British Columbia. So we have some competitive advantages in terms of trade with Asian countries. And I think we haven't really exploited it as much as we can. They're not going to be quick fixes, right? Particularly with countries in Asia, if you go there, there's a term, any Asian Canadians here, there's guangxi, it's called, which means essentially friendship. Like you need deep friendship, they need to trust you and understand that you're there through all of this before they'll do business in a wholehearted way. So you need to invest in the relationships in all these countries where we have a mutual beneficial interest. And I think if you do that, if Canada does that, and Canada's been retreating from that, by the way, and the current federal government is cutting funding on aid and all those things, which are really dumb, because those are soft power initiatives that Canada can produce and British Columbia can piggyback on to really develop those. We may not see that in the next 3 or 4 years, but long term, this is where we have to go. We have to diversify our trade relationships away from the United States. The United States will always be there. There'll always be a trading partner in some fashion, but the opportunities are immense in the fast-growing part of the world, which is in Asia.
So when I was the chief of my nation, I had the opportunity and the privilege to travel both to Asia and to the UK. And my summary in that is that Canada is a country that's rich in natural resources, but we've really haven't brought it to market, which I think this is timely. We're finally getting there. What I've seen is that we've always sort of been living in the shadows of the United States, selling our oil and gas to them for cheap, and they're turning around making money off of it. So I think that has to change. And one of the things in the work that I've been doing is we've had Asian countries coming to us, asking us, telling us, saying we have a 6-step energy plan. We're on step 2. We can't get past step 2 without Canada's LNG. So I think we're in a space where now is the time to get our product to market, which is really, I think, can only help Canada. And I think that here in BC, we have 204 First Nations. That's a third of what the rest of the country is. You know, we have 600 plus First Nations across Canada, but a third of them are here in BC. So Indigenous partnerships, all of those pieces need to come into play here. And I think we're at the helm of a great opportunity for not only BC, but Canada and also Indigenous people.
Well said. Yeah, well said. When I was Forest Minister, we did a trade mission to Japan, and it was the first trade mission of any country after COVID. So it was a bit, everybody was still wearing masks, and they were a bit, we were the first group to come in, but we had representation from Indigenous companies, and I did Indigenous Forest Council, and the companies that we talked to said they liked doing business with BC because of what we were doing with reconciliation and the fact that the Indigenous people were there at the table with us in Japan, but also because of our environmental standards. They said it was, for them, that meant a lot for them. Every one of them commented on it. They said it was important to them, and now Ravi's just done a trip to, as you said, to Japan and South Korea, and they had Indigenous representation too, and it makes a significant difference. I mean, the minister opens a door, but the people that come on the trade mission are the ones that do the deals, and that's the best thing. And for our last question, and you all get to answer it. Yeah, good job. We're doing good on time, I think. I haven't got yelled at yet. Quietly, okay. I haven't got this. I said my husband used to stand at the back of the room when I was talking, and if I got talking too long, he'd stand there and go like this. Okay, cut it up.
And my wife.
Yeah. And then he said, that's what my wife did too. So I said, I wouldn't do that to them tonight. So anyway, the final question to each of you, and Karen, we're going to start with you. The challenges that BC and Canada are facing with the tariff and economic uncertainty are significant. And how do we ensure that the efforts the BC government takes ensure fairness so that all British Columbians are included in the prosperity?
Well, I'm always going to play the Indigenous card here. I think as long as the Indigenous people are at the forefront, the consultation, the accommodation, the inclusion across the value chain on major projects, I think we're going to have win-win-win across the board.
Well, as a proud trade unionist, I'm gonna say it's unionization. I mean, it truly, there is nothing more powerful that we can do than to give someone access to a union card. It is the single most effective way to lift someone out of poverty and into the middle class. And I work in a real special corner of British Columbia in the construction sector, where I get to see both, how life-changing unionized jobs in the construction industry can be. That those $150,000 incomes that we're able to bring and unlock for people, those opportunities. And yet I'm also able to see, what happens when on the Canada line, we bring in temporary foreign workers and we pay them less than $4 an hour. I'm able to see the effects of, asbestos exposure and, look at the long and proud work that the unionized construction industry did to ban asbestos. And just recently, during COVID, the work that our unions did during that process and bear with me because I think it's worth talking about. When the province shut down and COVID was announced, British Columbia was one of the only provinces where we didn't stop building as construction workers, not for one single day. And 200 people, put a hard hat on and continued to work and carried the economy on their backs. And they didn't have running water. And it was building trades unions that worked with our government, and a huge appreciation to Premier David Eby, because we didn't have running water, we didn't have flush toilets at a time where we were told to wash our hands, and it was Premier Eby that required flush toilets on major construction projects, and it's something that we have today, and we're grateful for. But we didn't red circle just union construction projects. Every major construction project has flush toilets, right? And for my brothers and sisters in the labor movement who are not yet unionized in the construction sector, come see me after. But also know that the wages and the job security and the benefits that building trades unions are securing lift your floor. That we bring you up with us, and I think it's one of the most powerful things we can do.
Thanks, Bryn. Almost got the hook for you.
I agree with Karen and Bryn, so I'm going to end, because this is the end, with a nakedly political point. Look, the best way to ensure fairness in British Columbia is to make sure this racist, pro-measles party that never gets elected in British Columbia, and we elect an MVP there.
Well, that was a great way to end. And I want to say thank you to all of you for coming in, because it's a long day, and we have another reception, so we got to make sure we're out of here by 7. But I just want to thank the panelists, because you guys, it was an amazing discussion. You have a wealth of information to share. And again, if you didn't hear in the beginning, they are going to be here until 7. So if you want to ask any of them questions that you didn't get answered, they're only too happy to. And Brad said that he would also take on any questions if anybody had any issues with the foundation. So he said, don't give any of us hell. Anyway, I'm going to turn it over to Brad now, but thank you.
Back. We'll give the text a sec. There we go. I can hear that now. First of all, thank you. An amazing panel. That was amazing. We could have done this much longer. As New Democrats, I'm sure we'd probably go a couple more hours. But alas, we have other things to do. As a special bonus, we're blessed. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge Premier Eby has joined us tonight here in the ballroom. An amazing speech today, Premier. Outstanding, heavy lifting, and of course you've got your reception in a few minutes. But thank you so much for joining us today. It's been amazing. I want to call up a special friend of the foundation. We've talked a lot tonight. We heard the 3 distinct perspectives about what we need to do as a province to build resiliency and growth under tremendous challenges that is being imposed upon British Columbia by the U.S. White House. And we talked a lot about natural resources, we talked about energy, we talked about mining. I thought there'd be nobody better to maybe just share just some closing comments on what he heard from tonight, from this panel, and what we can expect coming in the near term as a response, in the British Columbia's response, Premier and the Cabinet's response. Then our friend, the Minister, Adrian Dix. Now, Adrian, would you please come up and just take a handful of moments? My former boss, that's not why he's up here. Anyway, Adrian, over to you.
Okay. So, the Premier, 1971, I like that. So, the Premier's here, and he just gave one of the best kick-ass speeches a convention has ever heard. And when he walked in, everyone said, well, hopefully he'll have something to say tonight. And then they get me. It's like that, you know, you were waiting for Beyonce and you got Nelly Furtado. I don't know if that's the right metaphor. Now she's Canadian. For people in Glenn's generation, you're expecting Frank Sinatra and got Joey Bishop. You know what I'm saying? It's a little like that. But I want to thank our panel tonight. I think they evoke the current challenge. Karen Ogen is really a legend in this province. Right? And I met Karen first at a very difficult occasion, which was a funeral in Burns Lake of a guy named Robert Luggie Jr., who is a union leader and died in the explosion, the mill explosion in Burns Lake. And Karen took circumstances that we all know, which are the freezing out of First Nations from the wealth of this province. When projects came, she engaged. It is always harder to say yes than to say no. Always harder to engage. But she didn't do that. She saw the situation of the people she was leading, and she made a difference. And there are no major projects that are going to happen in BC, not under our Premier, that aren't going to involve First Nations people. I am proud of that. I'm really proud to hear from Bryn Burke. You know, there was a time when you'd say in politics, the only reason you do or not do something was about money or politics. Politics, do you want to do it or do you not want to do it? Money, could you afford to do it or not afford to do it? The truth is now, it's money and it's politics and it's having access to labor. We have seen projects in our province be delayed at very high cost because of inadequate access to labor. And the significant step that the Premier and our outstanding new Advanced Education Minister, Jesse Sunner, took yesterday, along with the building trades, indicates that. If we are going to succeed as a people, we have to be able to build it ourselves, and that means training a generation of people to share in the wealth, because all of the transfer in wealth that we want to see in society, they're represented by things like public health care and public education. The key way that we do that is to ensure that people are paid fair wages for the skills that they have, and we are doing that now because of the actions taken by the Premier and the leadership shown by people like Bryn Burke. Now, finally, of course, there's Glenn. And I've been hearing Glenn for about 41 years. He was great tonight. Because what Glenn shows, and what I think we know, is the possibility of hope in these really challenging times. That we use our British Columbia difference, our public power, our public resources, our skilled labor, our land, and put it to use for the people of BC. This is a challenging time. We signed an agreement with the United States at Ogdensburg in 1940. Some people were opposed to that. One of them was Winston Churchill, which talked about our joint defense of North America against the Nazi threat. Our alliance with the United States went through the Columbia River Treaty and the Otto Pact and the 1988 Free Trade Agreement. And we all know what the debate was. I was against it, by the way. So was Glenn. at the time. But what was said at the time was that the free trade agreement, because of the unity it was going to bring with the United States, would grow the economy, and there's an argument that it did. But that it would also bring us too close to the United States. It turns out that the people in favor and the people against were both right in important ways. But that moment is gone. And we have to act now, and we have to act with urgency now. And that means not paying attention to the noise, a lot of which is coming from the United States, a lot of which is coming in the political debate, but focusing on the signal, investing in a clean economy that involves people, that involves BC workers, that diversifies our markets, and that allows us to work together. And I'm doing it for everyone will do things in politics for their own reasons. I was health minister in BC for 7.5 years. Healthcare, for me, is my most important issue. It's my signal issue. We have to continue to build the healthcare system that we want and need, and that requires us to drive economic growth now. And so our three speakers tonight, I think, exemplified what we need to do as a province and what we must do as a province, and what, with urgency, the Premier is telling us in his speech today, and he certainly told me when he asked me to be Minister of Energy and Climate Solutions we needed to do, which is to lead on climate, yes, but to lead on economic justice and economic growth, which are essential for everything. I want to thank the Douglas Caldwell Leighton Foundation. I think when you mention those names in an audience of New Democrats, they mean a great deal. They certainly do to me. I want to thank them for sponsoring this, for their continued effort. And we have to, right now, as a party and as a province, take the fight to the situation we're facing. Take the fight to the United States, yes, but to take this moment of urgency, to act urgently together. If we do that, we can succeed in doing something that other generations have done in important times, which is to build a more just, more equal place that will best serve the people of BC. Thank you. Thank you to our guest speakers. Thank you to the founders.
That was really fantastic. Adrian, Minister Dix, thank you so much for being here. That was really inspiring, and it's nice to have that insight. I feel like we're all insiders now, thanks for you sharing. Thank you all for being here tonight. I have some thank yous to go through, and so bear with me while we do that. This is a really important event, and if you've enjoyed it, I want you to know you're not alone. There are thousands of people across this country this year who've attended our lecture events and had a similar experience thanks to the work we're doing. You heard from Brad Levine earlier, our Vice President. Tommy Douglas wanted us to do this work. And if it's not for you and our partners and our supporters and our members, we can't do it. So please take a look at the card. You have an invitation. If you're not a member of the foundation, please consider to become one. You can do it tonight with one click of your phone. Next year, by the way, 8 lectures, 8 cities, pretty big deal. It's an incredible growth, so thank you. Again, tonight would not be possible. We would not be sitting here enjoying delicious food and refreshing beverages if it weren't for our sponsors. So thank you so much to BC's Building Trades. Thank you, Bryn, so much for all that you do and all your affiliates do. Thank you so much to the IBEW, BC Provincial Council. Phil Venois, thank you so much for being our partner. Extremely grateful. To Leuna 1611. Leuna 1611, by the way, they are a founding partner of this event. They gave us a commitment, a 10-year commitment, that every year they would fund this event. So a real big shout out to Leuna 1611. Newmont Resources, thank you so much for coming in and taking on the reception for all of us. Very helpful. And IATSE 891, thank you so much for your stage sponsorship. I'm very grateful. To all of our sponsors, we have a special gift that I'll be presenting all of you later on. To our partners as well, Scott Lunny's here from the United Steelworkers. Thank you, Scott, for your ongoing support. AMAPCO, PSAC, NUPG, UFCW, QP, and PIPS, the Professional Institute of Public Service of Canada. These are our partners. They ensure that we're able to do all of this work all year round. So I'm very grateful to all of them. I'd also like to thank a few other special folks in the room. I'd like to thank Heather McPherson, who's our MP and running for federal leader, for being in the room, and also to Neil Johnson for coming by, Rob Ashton for coming by, and Avi Lewis sent his regards as well. So thought I'd let everybody know that. Folks, please stick around. If you don't have to run off to another event, there's still food and drinks to be had. I encourage all of you to enjoy yourselves in fine fellowship. Thank you all, and to all of you online, thank you for attending. Folks, have a great evening. Cheers.